I find that I'm actually quite envious of TCKs. I think I've been so used to being an outsider. Welcome, beautiful people, to the Lost and Local podcast. This is your boy, Adam, coming from the Traveling On Studios here in Seoul, South Korea. It is a frigid day today. It's starting to feel like winter, although it's not technically winter yet. But the high today in Seoul, for example, it's a high of -3 degrees. And that's -3 degrees Celsius. Now, you might have noticed that, unfortunately, my co-host is not with us today. But a shout out to Hannah. She has no fault to herself. This is not her fault for not being able to make it today, but she has had some situations that transpired that we were not able to collaborate and do a podcast together, but she will be coming back to Korea to visit soon. So I'm excited to see her, and hopefully we can have some podcasts together again here in the studio. But in the meantime, I did not want to end our streak. We are now coming up today. This is our today as I record this, our 36th podcast. We started back in April, and we've done 36 straight weeks. That's like over 9 months of podcasts weekly, which I'm very proud of both of us for doing. Really enjoyed the last podcast with Un and Christine. So this will be a little bit short of a podcast, but I was thinking about the fact that my co-host is truly a TCK, and as an Korean adoptee, I guess I'm not technically a TCK, but I think adoptees are uprooted and TCKs kind of feel rootless. Now, you may be wondering what got me to think about this. So a couple days ago, I got reached out to by another fellow Korean adoptee. He and I worked in the Pacific Northwest at the same retail bank, and we were in a regional meeting with a bunch of other branches, and I was just starting to get to know him. And he had mentioned to me, this is probably 8 or 9 years ago, he had mentioned to me, "Hey, Adam, if you don't know, you can actually claim your Korean citizenship." And I remember going home to my wife and saying, "Hey, I just heard from another Korean adoptee that Korea passed a law that allowed Korean adoptees to become Korean citizens." And it kind of was like an idea that got planted in my heart and in my mind, but it wasn't something that I thought would actually happen. If you've followed this channel, you know that I eventually did move back to Korea over 7 years ago, and about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, I officially became a Korean citizen. But I think, and the reason why I was thinking about that is that my friend who is a Korean adoptee, myself being an adoptee, even at the church that my wife and I currently go to, which is Ark Seoul. Shout out to my church. But even in our church, which is predominantly a TCK church, our pastor has a huge heart for TCKs. There are 3 Korean adoptees that go to Ark Church, including myself. Shout out to the other 2 ladies. You know who you are if you watch this podcast. But yeah, so it got me to think about Korean adoptees technically versus TCKs. And it's interesting because, of course, I'm a Korean adoptee, and my co-host, Hannah, is a TCK. Of course, I married into a TCK, which is my wife. So she and I have been married over 18 years. It's crazy how fast time goes by. I think that as a Korean adoptee, I've had a lot of experience now, not just on the podcast, having different interviews with different TCKs, but I've also had a lot of experience just working working isn't the right word, coming alongside and serving in different Korean ministries over the years when I lived in the States. All of that was with TCKs, and then moving to Korea, mostly the people that I interacted with were TCKs. So I have been exposed to TCKs now for over 30 years, 32 years to be exact. And even though I've been exposed to TCKs this whole time, I honestly still have a hard time completely resonating with TCKs. And it's kind of funny because I am a co-host of a podcast that's about TCK. And if you don't realize, technically Korean adoptees don't really fall under third culture because technically the true definition of third culture is the first culture is where your parents were born. And then most of that, and then the second culture is you growing up in a different country that your parents grew up in, but because your parents migrated to a different country. So, for example, most of the people that I know were born in Korea or grew up in America, and their parents are from Korea. Then they grew up in America where their parents weren't raised in America. They were raised in Korea, but then the second culture for those kids were they grew up in a westernized culture, but then also were learning and embracing their first culture of their parents, but then they weren't really first culture in Korea and they weren't really the second culture where they were raised in. And so then they created a third culture, which is the TCK, where they kind of have their own culture. And often TCKs have traveled around a lot. For example, Hannah, my co-host, she's now living in her fourth country of residence. So, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that even the title of this podcast is Uprooted versus Rootless. And I feel like for myself, as technically not a TCK, my story, if you're going to just throw out a very general statement, is Korean adoptees like myself are uprooted, where TCKs, the majority of the people that I interact with and all the people that we interviewed here on the Lost and Local podcast, they're rootless, or they're TCKs who had a lot of different third culture experiences. I have to say that even though I resonate with some of their experiences, whether I interacted with third culture kids in America, or whether I interact with them now here in Korea, some of their shared experiences I can resonate with, but it's hard for me, as a adoptee, to completely understand everything. And this is not to throw a pity party for myself at all. But this is just something that I've observed, is that I find that I'm actually quite envious of TCKs. Even though like the whole idea of TCKs is to promote a community where you can find identity and embrace a community that understands you, I am pretty envious of that, actually. Because as a Korean adoptee, there aren't many of us. And even when I was part of the Korean community for decades in America, and I came alongside and served in that, I never really completely understood them because I didn't experience what they had experienced. My experiences were very unique to them, so they couldn't really understand me. And I remember just kind of noticing how nice it was for them to either be part of the same community, part of the same church, where they could sometimes just find comfort in knowing that, hey, like so-and-so, they have Korean parents like I have Korean parents, and we all experienced growing up in America where our parents can't speak English well, where we had to help navigate, et cetera, et cetera. And I felt like that must be nice to have that like-mindedness where I didn't understand that whole concept. And I find that even though I go to a church now that's TCK oriented, I find that I have a hard time completely understanding the vast majority of TCKs, but I definitely do find similarities. But and it's interesting because since I've been here in Korea for 7 years, there is kind of a small amount. I don't know how small or how big, but there is a percentage of Korean adoptees like myself that are now moving back to Korea. And also the same thing with TCKs. There's a there is a percentage of Koreans who grew up in a westernized culture, but are now coming back to their roots and living in Korea, which I think is pretty amazing and very courageous and very brave. Even though I've been here for 7 years, I know that there are groups, whether they're like on social media or official groups, some like sponsored by the government or helped funded by the government, where Korean adoptees can come back to Korea and find community with each other. In fact, two of the Korean adoptees that go to my church, they both have been a part of that Korean adoptee gatherings. I have not gone to one, but there is a part of me that would kind of like to try it out, just to kind of like, it's such a niche thing though. I mean, third culture is niche, but Korean adoptees living in Korea, that's very niche. I found that, I don't even know if I would resonate with them either. Because at least for myself as a Christian Korean adoptee, because I think there's a lot of Korean adoptees, unfortunately, that are not Christian. I don't know if I would resonate with that group very well. I have spoken to the other adoptees about that go to my church, and I do kind of want to go and to one of the events, and maybe I can be the salt of the earth, the light of the world to them, help be the aroma of Christ to people like Korean adoptees who may be lost, even though they're coming back to their country. And there's a part of me that feels guilty because I'm not investing in that community. But I feel like also I wouldn't completely understand them either, because I think as a believer, my community is the church. I think I've been so used to being an outsider. It's almost like a fear, I think. It's almost like a fear to be a part of the niche community of Korean adoptees. When I was younger, in my late teens to early 20s, I was a camp counselor at a predominantly Korean adoptee sponsored by Holt International camp in Oregon. That's how I fell in love with Oregon, ended up moving out there, went to school out there, met my amazing wife, et cetera, et cetera. But even within that culture camp that was predominantly Korean adoptees, even though I found some solace with them, it was more of a secular type of group. It wasn't there were Christians in the group, but we were so young. I don't know how serious we took the community, and we were so displaced from each other, because the people that would come to this once a year, we all lived in different parts of the country. So it wasn't like we all lived in the same community. So I did get a little bit of that experience, but I think now as I've gotten older, I don't know if I have the capacity to embrace that niche culture that I'm a part of, the uprooted Korean adoptee culture. In some ways, I do find TCKs are really courageous, because they are making the effort to reach out to each other, and they are making the effort to get it out, out in the ether. So people who maybe weren't able to articulate their story or feel like they had experiences that no one else could resonate with. So I find a lot of encouragement to see TCKs that are embracing who they are and courageous enough to go out there and try to build a community where they are of encouragement to each other. So that is pretty cool. And I am thankful to be a minor part of that TCK culture with my co-host Hannah. And I do love understanding where people come from, understanding their story, embracing their experiences. So that is something that I really enjoy, but it's not something I'll ever completely resonate with, unless I guess I bring in a Korean adoptee. Yeah. So that is also, if the ladies from my church are willing, I'll have to bring them onto the podcast that are Korean adoptees and get their perspectives. And I don't know if I don't want to create another niche podcast. Yeah, this is just an old man just thinking out loud. I guess this whole idea of Korean adoptees are uprooted and TKCs are kind of rootless. So it was just some thoughts that I had in the old cranium. Yeah, that's just me thinking out loud. I don't know if any of this even made sense. I actually don't even know if I made sense, but I just wanted to, just dialogue with you all. And I appreciate you. I appreciate all the support. Hannah and I are looking forward to I think she'll be here for 2.5 weeks, and we're hoping to do some podcasts together, bring in some more guests. I'm looking forward to what the future has in store, wherever this podcast takes us. But thank you so much, you all, for the support that you guys continue to give. And yeah, let's just take this journey together. In the meantime, you all, God bless. Peace.